Okay, welcome back. In this section of tutorial, I will show you how to get those rings, and as well, we're gonna use a bunch of mats to make sure they get cut off on the edge, right? Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. So we're gonna use the circle loop at echo. Okay, as you can see, it's already working. And what you want is delay the whole animation by, let's say, minus 1 second. Okay, make like, let's say, like 10 copies of echo. And what's happening is, if I set this, with the animations going like so, it just keeps going on and on and on. Now, if you have the echo operator set as add, this is happening, so it just constantly is being shown here for some reason. But if you composite it in the back, it just disappears. Okay. Now the thing we need to do is make sure the circles get cut off once they leave the edge of our heads-up display. So the way to do this, it's easy. Just take the border itself, duplicate it, call it circle mat, and what we need to do, I'm gonna change the color of it so we know it's a different one. Okay, so size, it has to be exactly the same size as the border itself, but instead of doing all these calculations, I'm just gonna say to the After Effects, take this value, that's it. And because this mat, yeah, it doesn't have any colors, it has only stroke applied to it. So what I want to do is select, okay, let me show you, select the rectangle, go add fill, like so, and I want to get rid of stroke. Otherwise, if we increase stroke, the circle will come out here as well. So I just want the fill. Okay, well, what we need to do is just hide it. Oh, and there's one more thing. Sorry, we need to bring the position and anchor point of this border itself. So it's already been calculated, so there's no need to calculate this again. I'm just gonna link it and link it as well. Nothing changed, but the expression is just very simple instead of more complex and so on. It like saves a little bit of computational time. Okay, so that's set up. Now what you want to do is select your circle loop and add set matte effect. Okay, it disappears. That's fine. And now we just have to tell this effect which layer to use as a matte, which is going to use circle matte. Okay, and there you go, that's done. See how as animation progresses, it's just being cut off outside. It's just being cut off on the edge of the whole our heads-up display. What we're gonna do is create a little dot which represents a swarm of like spaceships or something. Okay, so I'm going to just make a circle. There you go. Okay, so what you can do is you can obviously animate this by hand if you want a specific pattern, but we can do this with expressions. And normally what you could do is to write like a wiggle expression and make it move 1 second over like 100 pixels. Right, like twice. So it does the movement, just slowly drifts, etc. And it will look like this on the graph editor. Okay. Now there are actually 5 options in the wiggle expressions. Most people use only the first 2, and there's extra 3 which we can actually use to our advantage. So frequency, obviously how often your object moves, amount or amplitude, just how far it moves per second, for example, like 1 second every 100 pixels. Octaves, this is your noise in each movement, so all these extra little jumps in between changing of direction, you can say. And amplitude is how much each movement is multiplied by each octave. So I understand this as a noise fall-off. And this is the last one I kind of understand, which is basically current time of sampling of this noise and the whole movement, or you can change the sampling to a little bit further time. So I'm guessing you can use this if you have multiple layers using the same wiggle expression, but you want one perform the action a bit a different time than the others, but the same kind of option selected, right? So okay, so position selected, just load it up to Expressionist. You can see this is a little bit more complex. So if we modify the noise further, there you go. So you can see how it gets this extra little jerkiness in between. I hide this. And you can do this, just play with this even more, right? So if I zoom in on this property, you can see there's like more spikes between 1 and 2 seconds. And if I play this, let's see. You see how this just goes like a fruit fly, for example. Okay, this is a little bit too much. I want this to be nice and smooth, so maybe 0.7. There you go. And now we need to add few things. So what I would like to do is create this radar effect. So if I go back to the example, like this stuff, right? So you can see how the wave is passing over the swarm, and it's a little bit, you can see that a little bit ahead and then pretty much fully behind as it passes over. So I'm imagining this is like a radar type of device. Okay, so the way you can do this is just basically utilizing the same rig we built. Just need to duplicate it and call it swarm mat. Just gonna change its color to something different so we again can differentiate what's going on, like a green. Okay, just bring it to the bottom and add set mat effect to this swarm. So with this, with swarm selected, you just point it at mat and make sure you select use effects and masks, because this mat has effects added to it. Okay, so now let's see how this will look. There you go. At some point it gets discovered. Now this swarm mat is exactly the same as the circle loop, and we need to change that by accessing stroke, which is exactly the same. So what we can do, if I bring up my Expressionist, circle stroke max, if we add, let's say, like 50 pixels to it, there you go. The swarm, or the whole of the swarm will be selected, because actually this thing is pretty big. Now we need to soften this a little bit. So you can do this by adding fast box blur to it, for example. Let's bring it at the top of the effect stack, because you want the effect happen before the echo is applied, before the matte is applied. And if you do something like maybe 10 pixels, there you go. And I'm gonna turn this layer off. Now, as you can see how the edge shows up before the main body hits. And I would like to customize this effect a little bit more and make the dots show up after the wave passes them over. So you have this kind of discovery phase and they get this like radar ping, you can call it. So the way to do this, we need to set up two things. Basically, I need to add another slider because I want to have control over the amount of stroke, and you can call this swarm fall off. Okay, just make it like something like, I don't know, like 50 pixels. I'm gonna grab the Expressionist and link. Okay, bring all the expressions here, and now I just need to add another variable in the top. So now we have variable referencing our slider control, and then I'm gonna replace the number coded in to this amount, and I need to add this to our stroke. There you go, nothing changes, but if we play with our follow, you can see how quickly this gets discovered, right? If I just show this to you. Okay. Now, I would like to push this whole circle inside this circle. Oh, sorry. I would like to push this whole stroke inside this area. So the way we can do this is with, let me just clear that, and adding one of the modifiers, which is called offset path. Okay, so let me just turn off the blur so you can see this better. Okay, so this thing just basically makes your path bigger or smaller. And we want to make it smaller at around 20 pixels. The problem is we have expressions applied to it, to amount, anchor point and position. And I tried playing with it, but for some reason the code doesn't take the offset path into account. So it still sets the anchor point here where it should be there. So the whole circle fits within those boundaries. But that's fine because our swarm will be mostly in front of the spaceship. I can just imagine like this scenario, so I'm not going to worry about this so much. Okay, so go back to our content. Now this, with previous experiments when I was like setting up the whole rig, I discovered that if I take this fall off and link it like so with the slider and bring this in Expressionist so you can see. Okay, so this is our fall off as a variable. If I take it, we're gonna call this offset because this is our final value. If I take this fall off and use about, I think, 20%, and as a negative number, this should be enough to push this extra stroke inside of our layer, like the circle itself. Let's see. There you go. That's 20, a little bit not enough. So just add 25%. There you go. I just want this to be roughly on the edge. You can just fine use play with the values, because if we take where's the control layer? Oh, actually, not sorry. If you go to controls for the blur, it just gets blurred very, very nicely. Now you can leave it as it is, and let's see how this looks. So it just gets discovered like that, likewise. Okay, but what I figured it's let's see, there you go. You can change the appearance of that a little bit better to reflect kind of the direction this is swooping. So imagine this is swooping from this side, it goes like zoop. So we want the kind of blur to be directional to this point, and you can add effect to it. That will do. That you can add effect to this layer that will handle that. So let me just cancel all of that for a second. Just hide. Now leave the swarm, circle, and this. So there's like less stuff going on. Okay, so I'm going to add radio. Where are you? CC radial blur. Actually, I'm gonna go for the fast one. So I'm gonna bring this before all the effects. Turn this off for a second. I want to set the center point to roughly, there we go. Okay, roughly the anchor point. So all the blur happens from here. And instead of zoom going standard, you can play with the values, depends on your setup. Like brightness will look like this, which just goes from bright point outwards, and I think I want the opposite. There you go. So we have this nice feathered edge over here, as you can see. Okay, and yes, we can link this amount to our. I'm gonna just make a keyframe quickly, and I will need a keyframe for that in a second. So yeah, there you go. I can see them quickly and easily. We can link the amount of blur to our fade, like this. There you go. And then in the keyframe and the center, if I see no position, which one was? Yeah, that was position. So put the keyframe here. Just not enough space. Okay, there you go. So I want to link the center of the effect to the position of this layer, because I'm guessing the effect is being calculated as this is a 0, and then I'm sorry, these values are calculated from the anchor point of the layer, not from the composition itself. So if I just link it to the position, okay, so this way every time position changes, so if I turn the expression for a second, this effect stays to this spot. So isn't like if you move this layer in your setup, etc., it's not gonna gets affected. So it will always be linked to that spot, which is what we want. Okay. So yeah, we have our radio blur. Now the last thing to do is blur out this edge, and we can do that with fast box blur. That's a little bit too much. Make it like 2 iterations and maybe 7 pixels. There you go. I just need to soften this a little bit so the layers start appearing before getting swooped totally. Okay, gonna actually let's just turn this off and see where's my swarm and circle loop. So let's see the effect. Barely see it, but it's there. My playback is a little bit slow because there's video recording going on and this is happening as well. Now, if I change the number of echoes, I want all of that being reflected in our swarm mat. So that's what we need to do. We need to simply, I'm just going to maximize this. Open up all the effects for echo and link them to this layer, which is our circle swoop. So if I modify it to have more echoes or longer time between the swoops, it will get reflected as well with the mat. Okay, now we have one swarm boogie going on. Instead of making lots of layers, I would like to use this layer to just drive the whole kind of animation and so on of the guy showing up on the screen. So what we can do is utilize the echo operator again. And I want to bring it up before the mat. Just have like maybe 10 echoes. And delay time, let's say -1 second. There you go, so you can start seeing they appearing. Now, they overlaying each other and just adding this, like, changing the color. So I don't want that. I want to have composite in back, so have exact copies. Now, because of this expression, it's not kind of swinging out and these guys are kind of clustered together. You can either change the expression to have, let's say, slower movement, 5.3, but cover more ground over time. There you go. And if I show you how this looks, you have this like swooping movements and these guys will follow. And as well, you can just delay the time, say 0.5 seconds or so. Okay, so this way we don't have to have a bunch of these layers floating around. You just have one swarm effect and then they just like floating around and so on.